Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Things as simple as like turning on the lights and running the coffee machine, even the cost of that has gone up.
More sticker shock. Why restaurant owners say you'll be paying more to dine out this year. Also,
this is rocket fuel for us to do really great things.
a massive cash injection to protect BC's parks from a Vancouver billionaire. Advocates say government needs to step up too. And sobering numbers. BC sets a record number of toxic drug deaths.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Lien Yeung. Thanks for joining us. From filling up at the pump to buying a carton of milk, prices have spiked just about everywhere. A new industry report shows the cost of eating out is up 6.5% compared to last summer. And by the end of the year, prices at some restaurants may go up by as much as 15%. As Zara Premji shows us, it's making it that much harder for some restaurants to stay open.
Something as simple as a cup of coffee will likely cost you more.
Yeah, that's to account for it costs more not only to like roast the beans, but then to physically get them here. And then, we have to make the coffee, we have to buy the milk, which is now more expensive. What are we gonna have for lunch today, guys?
Restaurant Canada says you could see prices in some spots go up by as much as 15% by the end of the year.
But the restaurant industry, I kind of feel like sort of teetering on a knife's edge because it could come crashing down really fast if something doesn't change, I think.
And with inflation leading to a rise in costs everywhere, there is a certain level of shock for some restaurant goers.
Holy crap, it takes me, $30 just to eat lunch. Like, that's crazy.
We're fully meal prepping just to kind of pinch our belts and save a few bucks.
An all too familiar situation across the industry, but unavoidable for most.
When you look at dairy up nearly 20%, beef 16%, cooking oil 20%. So there's been a lot of inflationary pressure. And then people sometimes forget that we also use a lot of natural gas. I mean, we do have to cook and clean dishes, so our natural gas costs have gone up by about 22%.
But those in the industry say that's still not being fully reflected in the new prices.
Really, our restaurants are not even passing on all of those inflationary costs to the customers, where a lot of our members are trying to offer that value to their guests while they're making no money for themselves.
And where they can, they say they'll continue to keep costs low.
As much as possible, they're trying to be small, minute changes so that it's not really ruining anybody's day. But if the pattern continues, not just here, but in the entire restaurant industry, we're going to be paying $10 for a cup of coffee in 2 years if nothing changes.
An option, he says, that just isn't sustainable. Zara Premji, CBC News, North Vancouver.
Almost 200 people died from toxic drugs in BC last July. That's according to a new report from the BC Coroner's Service. More than 6 people are dying from toxic drugs on average every day. 192 people were killed from overdoses in July, up 30% from the 147 who died in June. The loss means nearly 1,300 people have died so far in 2022, setting a record for the first 7 months of the calendar year. The BC Parks Foundation says it has received the largest private donation in Canadian conservation history. Lululemon founder Chip Wilson and his wife Summer are giving the foundation $100 million to preserve park space across the province. Yasmin Gandam has more on that announcement.
We're donating $100 million to the BC Parks Foundation.
He's built an empire off of black workout pants, but today, BC billionaire Chip Wilson is going green in the form of a $100 million donation to protect 25 places across BC by 2025.
People must have gone, what are you doing a park for? He says there's parks everywhere. I mean, that's all we are is one big park. But civilization will come, and we need to set aside these lands for people and for conservation.
The donation will allow the foundation to protect 3 natural habitats: the Falling Creek Sanctuary in the Rocky Mountain foothills, the Tate Sanctuary at the Thompson and Nicola Rivers, and the Bourguiba Springs in the South Okanagan. It's part of a larger countrywide initiative, which hopes to honor the UN Convention on Biodiversity by protecting 25% of the country's land and water.
We're right now about 18% of British Columbia, protected about 13.5% of Canada. To get to 25% by 2025 is a massive goal. It's 7 million hectares in British Columbia alone.
Indigenous communities say the money is crucial to preserve their land.
As the land connects us to ourselves, our communities, and holds the key to our languages, stories, culture, and knowledge.
Others who have been working for years to protect BC's lands and fight climate change say the donation is a step in the right direction, but does not go far enough.
It's really important for the BC government to come together with the federal government, make significant commitments so that Indigenous nations are not being forced to make a choice between impoverishment of their people or impoverishment of their lands.
The BC Parks Foundation says the donation is a crucial step in taking on climate change and loss of biodiversity. Yasmin Gandim, CBC News, Vancouver.
Visitors to Stanley Park's Lost Lagoon have noticed dozens of dead fish on the shore. Around 25 dead carp were found at the start of this month. A similar situation was seen last September when carp were seen floating and washed up on the shoreline. Last year, water quality tests were conducted, but the Vancouver Park Board says they were inconclusive. The board, however, maintains that this phenomenon is mainly due to low oxygen levels and high salinity from nearby Cole Harbour. The operators of the Sea to Sky Gondola have filed a lawsuit against the company that designed its security system, claiming that it failed. The new system was installed after the gondola was first vandalized in 2019. In its claims, operators allege the motion-activated alarm was never triggered during the second security breach, and the vandal was able to cut the cables, which sent the gondola cabins crashing to the ground again. Operators say the alarm was supposed to activate bright lights and a blaring PA system. The security company, Unified Systems, has not yet filed a response to the claim, and none of the allegations have been proven in court. Yesterday, police said the investigations into the severed cables was still ongoing, with the company doubling its reward to $500,000 for anyone with information leading to an arrest and conviction. Police are investigating after one man was shot early this morning in Cloverdale. Surrey RCMP were called around 5:30 a.m. to Angus Place Road. When they arrived, officers found a 35-year-old man who had been shot. The victim was taken to hospital and his injuries are not expected to be life-threatening. Investigators believe the shooting was targeted.
Our investigation is in still very early stages, so the motive of this shooting is unknown at this time. Our officers are in the area, and if you have not spoken with the police already, we encourage you to reach out to us if you have any information or you have CCTV footage regarding this incident.
Constable Senga says the victim is well known to police. Kamloops RCMP is asking for your help to learn more about a man who's been accused of sexually assaulting a girl. This is 38-year-old Guy Purcell. He's been charged with sexual assault, invitation to sexual touching, and uttering threats. Mounties are concerned he may have had other dealings with young people. They're asking parents to speak to their children about him. Anyone with information is asked to contact Kamloops RCMP. One man is suffering life-threatening injuries after a hit-and-run last night in Vancouver. The pedestrian was struck while crossing Clark Drive at Grant Street just before 9 p.m. The driver fled the scene. Paramedics took the victim to hospital, but details of their injuries have not been released. Police say the driver was in a black vehicle, which will be missing a side view mirror. Anyone with information is asked to reach out to police. The biggest wildfire in BC doubled in size over the last week. The Battleship Mountain Fire in northern BC continues to burn out of control. It's now ripped through almost 300 square kilometers. That's almost twice the size of Salt Spring Island. The east flank of the fire is about 4 kilometers from the WAC Bennett Dam and 8 kilometers from Hudson's Hope. More than 1,000 evacuees from that community are out of their homes for the 6th day. Slightly cooler weather is on the way, but increased wind is expected to bring more aggressive fire behavior. The fire has not moved closer to Hudson's Hope in several days. And meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. So, Joe, are we looking, favorable in terms of the wildfire forecast with the weather?
Leanne, as you mentioned, we will get some gusty winds as this cold front moves through, and that's cause for concern with how erratic those winds may be. But the rain is going to help. Take a look at right now where we have the special weather statements in place. They have been dropped for most of the province, with the exception of the northeast, where the battleship fire is in place. That smoke still dense, that fire still producing the smoke. Watch, though, as I show you the cold front that's coming through. That's what's brought the showers to Metro Vancouver this morning. There's more rain where that came from. And earlier models had that cold front not bringing the rain to the northeast. But watch this as I take you through the accumulated rainfall in the next 24, 36 hours. It does look like we will see not a lot, but maybe 10 millimeters of rain towards that northeast. You can see those darker greens, the 10 to 20 millimeter mark possible for the northeast. So really pleased to now see the top end of this cold front bringing some relief, and it may be the only relief we get in the next 10-day forecast. So it will be a double-edged sword, of course, with those gusty winds, along with the cool down and the rain, but I'm really hoping ultimately that rain brings us some good news. I want to talk more about that, the return to the heat though, Lien, because we'll get through the refreshing rain this weekend, but things are heating up in the long range. I've got those details ahead.
Okay, we'll check in with you in a bit. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
The real estate market is continuing to see a cool down after its red-hot climb through most of the pandemic. Ever since the Bank of Canada started raising interest rates in March, there's also been a steady decline in the number of homes sold. But as Philippe de Montigny reports, with interest rates expected to climb further, a lower cost for a house comes with a price.
Pierre Bichereau is looking to buy a new home closer to his work. But first, he has to sell his current property in Toronto's East End, in a market that's been really cooling off in recent months.
I was a bit afraid about what's going on in the market at the moment. Is there a strong bidding competition like before? Maybe not as much, but it's also about what you're going to accept.
The national average home price came in at just over $637,000 in August. That's down 22% from the peak in February, when Canadian homes were selling for $816,000 on average.
Absolutely, there's a slowdown, like night and day, from not even from February, but from last year. Last year was probably the busiest market that anyone has ever seen.
In some markets like Toronto, Ottawa, Victoria, and Trois-Rivières, average prices rebounded slightly in August compared to July. But experts say it's too soon to call it a turning point. As interest rates continue to rise, mortgages get more expensive, making it even harder for first-time homebuyers to borrow.
With the last increase in rates, we increase also the qualification rates. So what people can qualify will reduce, so eventually the price will have to match what people can afford.
Many experts, including this Toronto real estate broker, think the central bank should have raised interest rates much sooner and more gradually than it did, saying it went too hard, too late.
The market was just kind of unsustainable the way it was going, but they just didn't raise the rates. And now it's just an avalanche of rate hikes, right? It's just punch after punch.
After 5 rate hikes in 6 months, the Bank of Canada still plans to further raise its key interest rate to cool the high inflation. Economists expect home prices to bottom out next year, falling as much as 25%, if not more, from the peak in February. Philippe de Montigny, CBC News, Toronto.
The Riolandia Music Festival is back in action this week in Victoria. It's been 4 years since Victoria last hosted the popular music festival. There are more than 110 performers booked, including the likes of Lorde, Charlie XCX, and DJ Diesel. Around 15,000 people are expected to pack the festival venues. This year, organizers say they've created an event anyone can enjoy.
It's very family friendly. We have a ton of things going on for kids this year. We want this to be accessible and being able to be experienced by everyone who would want to experience it.
Sounds like it'll be a lot of fun. Along with the musical acts, there will be food trucks, artisan makers, and even a licensed wedding booth. How about that? The annual Terry Fox Run returns to an in-person event this weekend for the first time since the pandemic. Across the country, Canadians will lace up their shoes on Sunday to raise money for cancer research. And the Terry Fox Foundation is predicting record high participation numbers. More than 560 communities and about 4 million Canadians are expected to take part. And to tell us more about this year's run, I'm joined by Terry's younger brother, Fred Fox. He was there during Terry's Marathon of Hope. So thanks for joining us, Fred.
Great to be with you. Thank you very much.
And so, Fred, over the past 2 years, the Terry Fox Run was held virtually. How are you feeling about going back to in-person and having everyone come together again?
We're so excited. I've been traveling the last couple of weeks across Canada. I was in Newfoundland on the weekend and through Saskatchewan and Alberta this week. So it's been amazing. We're looking forward to getting everybody back together in person and doing what we've been doing for so many years.
For sure. And so despite how the pandemic has changed the Terry Fox Run over those last 2 years, we still saw Canadians coast to coast fundraising. Why do you think everyone has been so committed to continuing Terry's work?
Well, I think it's Terry for sure, that honesty, integrity that everybody remembers from 1980. And, you know, we've all been touched by cancer. That's what Terry said. So I think everybody's got a connection to cancer and realizes the need of cancer research, and they're very supportive of the Terry Fox Run.
And this is the 42nd year of the run. What does it mean to you and your family to see Terry's legacy live on just decades later?
You know, we're so proud, as Terry would be. He would be so proud to know that so many Canadians, all these years later, young and older, are continuing what he started. He said when he was in Toronto, even if I don't finish, we need others to continue. It's got to keep going without me. And so many Canadians from coast to coast to coast have responded to Terry's challenge over 42 years.
And, you know, you're his little brother. What do you think Terry would say if he was around today to see so many Canadians and people around the world uniting around his cause?
He would be so proud to know that, you know, his sacrifice in 1980, what he was doing every day. Terry wasn't out there running because of he wanted to be rich or famous or be known as a Canadian hero. He was doing it because he wanted to make a difference in the lives of so many, and that's why we do it today. He'd be so proud.
Well, Fred, thank you so much for the work that you've done for the Terry Fox Run and continuing his legacy. Fred, of course, Terry's brother and a member of the Terry Fox Foundation.
Thank you.
Just as students are returning to the classrooms, a new study shows around 80% of children on the Lower Mainland have been already infected with COVID-19. Up next, we'll speak to Dr. Michael Curry about COVID risks moving forward into the fall. And thanks for staying tuned during our commercial-free live stream. The 49th annual Atlantic Bowls was held in Montreal this past weekend. Over 30 teams from Quebec, PEI, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick made the trip down to compete. Fabena Oduro was there.
Donna LeBlanc has been waiting 2 years to do what she loves. This year is an added bonus for the Kirkland resident, home field advantage.
It's just an awesome feeling just to see people again, your own people from your own province, plus from the other provinces that we have bowled against in the past years. It's just wonderful to see everyone out again and just pick up the friendships.
The Atlantic Bowls tournament is hosted by a different club each year. This year, the Beaconsfield Lawn Bowling Club got to host it for the third time in the 49-year history of the event.
You come across the same players over and over again, so it's, I mean, Quebec's treating us wonderfully. And yeah, it's good to be here.
But beyond getting together, most lawn bowlers here have one goal in mind: to get to the podium.
It's low impact, it's good for people of all ages, it's competitive, it's friendly, very sportsman type of sport where people are friendly and enjoy it, but we want to win.
How many medals have you had in your career playing with New Brunswick?
Absolutely none. But I've enjoyed playing every single time, and every once in a while I get to beat a top team, which is really good.
So just put your fingers in the ground. Okay.
Many lawn bowlers here say that they're willing to teach beginners how to play the sport for the first time. And as the tournament comes to a close, they're hoping to grow the sport in Canada.
That's better. Well done. Yes.
You can join on a social level, on a recreational level, or you can want to become competitive and have coaching right from the beginning. So yeah, so we can see it go nowhere but up.
Playing for fun was how LeBlanc got started.
My mother wasn't so competitive, she just did club things, but my father a little bit more, so we did a couple of tournaments together, and then my husband got into it, so it becomes a family.
And she hopes to continue spending time and growing her new family through lawn bowling. Kobino Duro, CBC News, Beaconsfield.
One down.
As we reported earlier this week, according to a study co-authored by Dr. Bonnie Henry, the vast majority of children have already contracted COVID-19. Close to 80% of children in Vancouver. For insight into the current state of COVID and kids, I'm joined by Dr. Michael Curry. He's an emergency room physician and a professor at UBC's Department of Emergency Medicine. Thanks for being with us, Dr. Curry.
A pleasure to be back.
So the recent study co-authored by Dr. Bonnie Henry shows that around 80% of young people under the age of 18 have either contracted COVID or have some sort of immunity at this point. What do you make of this study?
Well, I think there's three main takeaways I have from the study. First of all, it emphasizes just how contagious COVID is and how thoroughly it is spread through our population. The second point is it emphasizes that despite a large number of kids being infected, between children's natural protection against severe side effects due to their age and because of immunization, the side effects from this large wave of COVID infections has been relatively mild. The third thing, it emphasizes COVID's still around. It's not something that's behind us, and it's still, unfortunately, spreading in our communities.
And so, Dr. Curry, there has been some criticism of BC's health measures based on this study that some say that it shows a risk of transmission, especially through schools. What do you think of that? Do you think this is an indicator of that?
I think to an extent it is. We're looking at a large wave of infections over the summer, though, when school was out of session. But as anybody with children can tell you, children are very good at picking up and spreading viruses at daycares, kindergartens, and at school. So I think school plays a role in transmission, but the large wave of transmissions this summer shows that school is not the only place where this virus is being transmitted.
Right, for sure. And you had earlier mentioned that, the kind of the natural protection that kids have from COVID. What about the concern around long COVID and young people?
Well, we just don't have a lot of knowledge about that. Long COVID is a phenomena that we have picked up in adult patients, but fortunately, the number of cases that we've seen in children has been very low. And because it's such a rare incidence that we've seen so far, it's hard to draw many conclusions about it.
Do we think it's low because kids aren't able to tell us exactly what the symptoms are, or do we think that the numbers actually are low?
I suspect it's probably a little bit of both. Obviously, with younger children, it's difficult for them to communicate that they're sick. But also, we know children have generally been much less affected by COVID than older people. And that's a good thing. And I think we can export that and make a generalization that it's likely that long COVID will also have less effect in children than it does in people who are older.
Yeah, let's certainly hope so. And so, all of us parents out here, now that the school year has started, what do you think we should be keeping in mind as we head in through the fall?
Well, I think the big thing we should keep in mind is that COVID is not gone. It's still around and it's still spreading around. The other thing is we do have lots of other viruses, and we had a little bit of a break from influenza and some of the other respiratory viruses because of masking and social distancing during COVID, but we're seeing a lot of those in the emergency department right now. So these precautions for COVID, washing your hands, staying home when sick, and getting immunized when you can, still apply.
And do you still think that kids should be masking in classrooms? What's your advice on that?
I think masking in classrooms, because of the low rate of COVID, is much less important than it would have been several months or a year ago when COVID was more serious and we had less immunization. As the risk goes down, the need for masking goes down.
Okay, great insights. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Dr. Michael Curry, an emergency room physician and a professor at UBC's Department of Emergency Medicine. As mourners arrive outside Westminster Hall to mourn the death of Queen Elizabeth II, her successor is taking a day of rest away from the public eye. After the break, how King Charles has fared in the spotlight so far. That's next.
It all began at midnight in Halifax with a special torchlight run. At Point Pleasant Park, more than 100 people who were busy today looking after other race routes got an early start for their tribute to Terry Fox. In St. John's, Newfoundland, the main course was in Bowring Park. This is the city where Terry began his Marathon of Hope, and that's where the national campaign chairman of the Canadian Cancer Society, Jan Tennant, did her run.
He was a tremendous athlete and an inspiration to us all. And he touched our hearts. And his Marathon of Hope continues, and we all believe and support his dream that cancer can be beaten.
In Prince Edward Island, there were 32 run locations. Taking part in one of them was 79-year-old Beller Sanderson, who never ran in his life before.
I got a $1 pledge, a couple of twos, and the rest is from 5 to 10. I got $176 now. I don't think that another man could do what Terry Fox done.
In Edmonton, one of the key events was at the International Speedway. Across the country, there were hundreds of courses and hundreds of thousands of runners who collected millions for the fight against cancer. There were other courses outside Canada. Canadian diplomats in London ran for Terry, as did members of Canadian embassies in many other countries. As well, there were races in the United States. But the most sentimental run of all was in Terry's hometown, Port Coquitlam, BC. Sue Stern was there and has this report.
It looked like everyone in Port Coquitlam was huffing and puffing their way along the roads where Terry Fox spent endless hours in 1979, building his strength in preparation for the dream of his life. Many of these people used to see him chugging along, his face a mask of pain as he hopped around the neighborhood on his artificial leg. They had no idea who he was then, and they wondered just what he was trying to do, pushing himself so hard. They were all there for Terry on that same route today, close friends and strangers alike. From Mom and Dad, the kids in the family pooch, to Terry's good friends from his wheelchair basketball team.
Just a lot of reflections about old times with a good friend. And I just went out there and gave it my best, tried my hardest, and I feel that, it was well worth the cause.
There were all ages, all shapes and sizes, and all conditions. 19-year-old Arissa Payman has cerebral palsy and never runs except today.
It was an inspiration to me, and that's why I'm here. I'm publicizing getting help for cancer, not for my CP, and I just wanted people to know that.
The Fox family was there too, cheering everyone on and signing autographs for the kids.
Bye-bye.
It was an inspiring day in Port Coquitlam as they ran along Terry's path, a fitting way to remember the hometown kid who united Canada with his courage. Sue Stern, CBC News, Port Coquitlam, BC.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is trying to strengthen ties with his remaining allies. meeting today with China's leader Xi Jinping. As Briar Stewart shows us, Putin's facing increasing pressure over the war and a chorus of critics at home.
Vladimir Putin may be maligned in the West, but in Uzbekistan, he's a welcome participant in an 8-nation summit. This was the Russian president's first meeting with China's leader Xi Jinping since the invasion of Ukraine. We highly value the balanced position of our Chinese friends when it comes to the Ukraine crisis, he said. We understand your questions and concerns about this. It was a public acknowledgement that there may be friction in what has been referred to as a friendship without limits. She said China is willing to work with Russia to demonstrate the responsibility of a major country to inject stability into a turbulent world. Russia's war in Ukraine has made its relationship with China even more important, because the invasion has left it increasingly isolated on the global stage. And domestically, there are fresh signs of some dissent.
Vladimir Putin is the main existential threat to Russia, my country I love.
Nikita Yuferev is one of several local councillors in St. Petersburg who sent a letter to Russian lawmakers demanding that President Putin be removed from office. There are signs of high treason, they wrote. An incredibly risky move, seeing that an opposition politician in Moscow has recently been sentenced to 7 years in prison for discrediting the military.
But aren't you afraid of going to jail?
We use only words that Russian crime laws allowed us to call it, like special military operation.
Yuferev says he and others have received public support, but many have been fined. And in St. Petersburg, the court has signaled it will dissolve the council because, while Russia's influence is waning internationally, Putin's grip on power inside the country remains strong. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Members of Parliament paid tribute to the Queen today in Ottawa. As David Cochrane reports, they were called back to the House of Commons from their summer break for a special sitting in her honor.
They arrived at a place known for loud political argument and shared a moment of silence to mourn the loss of Canada's Queen.
The Queen meant so much to so many of us, and she exuded a humility and compassion that provided comfort to all.
The Prime Minister led the tributes to mark this period of transition, one punctuated by the debut of a new Conservative leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition.
It is with a heavy heart, but heartfelt thanks, and with confidence in the future that I say, Godspeed, Queen Elizabeth II, God save the King, and God bless Canada.
Tributes to the Queen, but also calls for her successor to continue the urgent work of the Crown.
I hope that when the Prime Minister has his first meeting with the new King, he will remind him of this outstanding call to action and the power that King Charles has to further the goal of reconciliation.
The outlier, the Bloc Québécois. Yves-François Blanchet expressed condolences for the death of the Queen, but the Bloc withdrew from the parliamentary tributes after the moment of silence, citing the historic relationship between Quebec and the British Crown.
If we were to come with the idea of a constitution for Quebec, I believe that this constitution would reserve no room for monarchy.
There is no such conflict for Justin Trudeau, who on Friday will lead a delegation of former prime ministers, governors general, and national Indigenous leaders to London to represent Canada at the Queen's funeral. David Cochrane, CBC News, Ottawa.
Tens of thousands of people from the UK and beyond have made the pilgrimage to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth. There was a lineup more than 6 kilometers long. As Abby Kugathasan reports, the queue continues to get longer despite people moving past her coffin 24 hours a day.
People streaming out of the Palace of Westminster say seeing the Queen's coffin with their own eyes was a devastating dose of reality.
To see our Queen, yeah, powerful, and yeah, what an example. Beautiful, awesome. Yeah, I feel very privileged indeed.
Waiting in line for 7-8 hours, strangers became friends. Wearing wristbands with numbers indicating their place in line, they were able to step out to get food or use the washrooms. Some 500 portable toilets have been set up along the route.
She's just been there all the way through. What a person. There'll never be another one like her. Sorry, I'm starting again.
Her 70 years on the throne respected too by some from former colonies who separate the woman from the institution.
She was like my mom, and we've grown up with her. I mean, I'm in this country last 43 years. I never missed not even a single day of speech when she is doing the Christmas speech.
Others inched along the River Thames and zigzagged their way through airport-style security to say goodbye, to show respect for the Queen, but not the Crown that committed atrocities against their ancestors.
There is history, and you cannot erase history. I think it's a discussion that will continue, should be had. People learn, people have different opinions, and you respect those opinions.
All this will come to an end on Monday. That's when the Queen's coffin will be moved from here to Westminster Abbey for a state funeral steeped in British tradition. 2,000 guests will be there, and millions more will be watching from around the world. Abby Kuwadasan, CBC News, London.
As Britons and people around the world bid a final goodbye to the Queen, attention is focusing on the new monarch. King Charles is being watched closely for signs of what his reign could bring. CBC's Chris Brown reports on what royal experts are saying.
Queuing may be the British way, but this line was remarkable, with up to an 8-hour wait to spend just a few moments next to the Queen's casket in Westminster Hall.
It's been really nice though, because everybody's been friendly and everybody's here for the same reason, do you know what I mean?
Outside the royal estate in Sandringham, the Prince and Princess of Wales thanked mourners.
The walk yesterday was challenging.
William reportedly told one woman that walking behind the Queen's casket on Wednesday was challenging and brought back memories of his mother, Diana, and her funeral 25 years ago. After an emotionally draining week, King Charles took a break from public appearances today. Since his mother's death, he's been constantly in the public eye, dealing with grief and also the intense scrutiny that comes with his new role.
I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow.
King Charles delivered a moving address to the nation.
Thank you so much for your...
He personally thanked crowds in Scotland and Northern Ireland, and he took part in a vigil next to his mother's coffin, all of which hints at a more transparent, visible monarch, says royal expert Robert Hardman.
His accession council being televised, I thought that was very, very interesting and very indicative. We've suddenly started seeing more audiences with ministers, with opposition leaders.
But transparency also carries risks, such as a minor meltdown when his pen leaked.
I mean, every monarch is different. They do things differently. I think he'll be 75 next year. We can't really retrain Prince Charles. We don't need to. He's the longest serving heir to the throne we've ever had. He will do it his way.
There's also been vigorous discussion here about if it's fair for King Charles to not pay inheritance taxes when ordinary Britons have to. But in this royal-friendly lineup, that wasn't front of mind.
You know, we own the royal family. They are ours.
Yeah.
You know, and whatever they've got, the castles, the wealth and so on, it's not theirs, not in reality.
Right. And look at the amount of money that they bring into our country as well.
This long vigil will consume London all weekend, right up until the Queen's funeral on Monday. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
As Canadians from coast to coast struggle to find a family doctor, it seems pets are also having problems. After the break, the growing demand for veterinarians. And there's a live look at Mystery Peak on Mount Seymour. Misty afternoon. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe will be back with your full forecast, and there might be some rain in there. Stay with us.
Some 200 municipalities in British Columbia depend on the Mounties for police protection, protection they pay for. But under a deal reached today by the BC and federal governments, they may not be able to afford it much longer. It's a 10-year deal, and by the end of it, larger municipalities will have to pay 90% of their RCMP costs. Some of the towns are already refusing to go along with the agreement. Jerry Thompson reports.
Williams Lake is cattle country, a small city of about 15,000 on a high plateau in the BC interior. It's a rough and tumble cowboy and Indian town where hard work and hard drinking are a way of life. 70% of all crime in Williams Lake is alcohol related, so the 33-member RCMP detachment spends most of its time running back and forth to the drunk tank. This year, the city will pay about 50% of the cost of the RCMP. By the end of the new 10-year agreement, local taxpayers will have to come up with 90%, and Mayor Tom Mason says that's too much.
And in this particular case here, the police are actually enforcing provincial laws like traffic and drug or alcohol related. And as far as the municipality is concerned, the cost is just too great, and the province is just shifting the load from the rightful people, which is the province, onto the local taxpayers, and we're not going to pay it.
So far, Williams Lake has refused to pay $300,000, its share of the RCMP costs. And City Council has set aside $30,000 as a legal defense fund, almost daring the province to take them to court. But there are other cities that would dearly love to pay only 90% of their police costs. Vancouver, for example, is a city that pays 100% of the cost of its own 1,400-member police department. That's $50 million a year. And what's good for Williams Lake is good for Vancouver, according to Mayor Harcourt.
The issue, though, is that 43 municipalities in this province, over 15,000 in population, receive anywhere from 40 to 20% cost sharing with the province towards the cost of their RCMP force. There are 12 of us who have our own police force who receive zero. So we're overtaxed in Vancouver this year, $9 million.
Mayor Harcourt insists that if Vancouver does not get the same kind of subsidy that Williams Lake does, the city police here may just refuse to enforce federal drug laws. Jerry Thompson, CBC News, Vancouver.
British Columbia Attorney General Alan Williams says Ottawa should pick up part of the operating costs for Vancouver's police force, mainly because so much police work in Vancouver involves federal drug offenses.
A widening gap in veterinary care is leaving many frustrated. Over the pandemic, many Canadians became pet owners. But as Meg Roberts reports, the increased demand has only brought more strain to already short-staffed clinics.
Nicely, Monty. Good boy.
About a year ago, Sarah Bennett's Great Dane Monty suffered a minor injury while playing at the dog park. The vet told her it was nothing a few stitches wouldn't fix, but there was no vet available to do it.
Where that's something that I've been fit in years past.
With a rise in pet ownership over the pandemic, demand for veterinarians increased.
It has to be actually catastrophic to get into the emergency vet. Otherwise, you're waiting for 4, 5, 6 hours. And that's sometimes troublesome.
Experts say the industry is facing a shortage and other issues.
Just like with human medicine, we're seeing veterinarians as frontline workers, and they're experiencing higher than normal rates of burnout.
I walked in here this morning, 2 emergencies on the in the exam room in the back, both on oxygen. My vets are full on. There's not an empty appointment in the clinic here today, and I know we'll all be trying to squeeze stuff in.
It can take up to 4 weeks for a general appointment at the Dundas West Animal Hospital. With not a whole lot of room for new clients, an issue Dr. Scott Bainbridge believes could be resolved.
To me, I think the answer there is to open more vet schools, and if we can increase capacity at our vet schools right now, I think that would make a world of difference.
There's only one veterinary school in all of Ontario. It graduates about 120 vets each year.
And that's probably not enough to keep up with it.
The College of Veterinarians of Ontario says it's focused on licensing internationally educated vets. This past year, about 50% of the 363 licenses it gave out were vets trained in different countries. Bennett says with 2 Great Danes, she'd like to know that a vet is available when she needs them.
Come on, Muzzy, up, good boy.
Meg Roberts, CBC News, Toronto.
And meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe, also dog owner, joins us now at the forecast. Does Rodney have a good vet, Joe?
He does, yeah. I'm lucky there's a local one, but honestly, I've talked to a lot of fellow dog owners, and it's the same sort of issues here in BC as well. So I'm glad we highlighted that. Rodney may jump in at any moment to voice his opinion. So stand by if we get that interview. Okay. Otherwise, I've got the showers in the forecast, Leanne. I know those felt so good today. A little earlier, the prefrontal showers, not for all of Metro Vancouver, really confined to North Burnaby, the North Shore. That's where we saw them most consistently. Take a look at the temperatures, though, across southern BC today. 18 at YVR right now. So a little cooler thanks to the cloud and the showers. 17 at YVR. And as we head inland, low 20s. So still above seasonal for much of the province, but those showers have really brought in that fall feel for today. And this is, again, 1 day earlier than the front is actually moving through. This is live radar right now. You can see sea to sky, lots of showers falling right there. It's starting to clear up this evening, but they will be back. Watch as I take you through the overnight. There's that cold front. Look for some gusty winds tomorrow morning as well. It is the morning commute that we'll probably see the greatest downpours before easing as we head into the afternoon. And then it's sort of a cloudy Saturday into Sunday, and that's when we get into a dramatic shift. So fall for Friday and Saturday. We may see a few showers Saturday morning, mainly cloudy though, and then high pressure builds back in for Sunday. Look at this forecast. Summer's last grasp at the forecast, Leanne. It's going to feel very warm for 1 more week. Those overnight lows will be a good relief though.
Okay, it will be. All right. So, Joe, speaking of warming temperatures, you've been looking into a new study on global warming and urbanization, and they found something that's kind of unexpected, right? That higher temperatures may not always lead to higher health risks?
Yes, that's right. Sort of a surprising takeaway from what really was a huge global study, taking the top scientists in a variety of subfields connected to the impact of heat all around the world, and basically trying to get a sense of how heat is impacting people and what we can do about it, especially with global warming and urbanization. And what they found was that right now, most of our heat solutions are municipal based, on a large scale, top down basis. But what we really need to do is scale down for an individual, because you can't say that everyone is going to experience that 35 degree in the forecast. It really depends on other factors. And I spoke to the co-author earlier today about a world in which we could be looking at individualization of these forecasts. Take a listen.
So right now, you have a weather report, which might give you specific information for your city, but rarely for your neighborhood, rarely for you. And if it's for you, then, there's some additional data layering that needs to happen there with, health data sets, et cetera, age, et cetera.
Of course, that really piqued my interest, how weather forecasts could be so much more complex and useful in the future. And Leanne, obviously, this is what we saw during the heat dome last year, the over 600 people that died, most coming from our vulnerable communities.
Yeah, for sure. Very sad in that case. So did the study offer recommendations, something for us to alleviate and prevent the next time we have a heat wave?
Yeah, so a lot of work still to be done, but a big part of the study was actually looking at the latest state-of-the-art research. And there were some takeaways that I was surprised, having to do with AC, air conditioning. And that was a big topic in the province after last year's heat dome. A lot of the research shows that, well, sometimes we do need AC. Blasting it, 80% of the time at most comfortable levels actually reduces your body's ability to acclimatize when you do step out in the heat. So it might actually be more dangerous. And obviously countries around the world that are more exposed to heat and humidity more often have that acclimation. But at the end of the day, Leanne, it really comes down to designing better cities. Take a listen.
Neighborhoods that might be wealthier or historically have been privileged relative to marginalized neighborhoods might have more greenery. And so how do we address that? How do we design our neighborhoods, and how do we modify existing designs? Like, how do we add more street trees in neighborhoods where vulnerable people live and there aren't many trees, for example?
I know these are the kinds of questions that we're looking at in our own communities, Leanne, and I'll keep you posted with the next round of research.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. Thank you so much for that, Jo.
You're welcome.
He's one of the most decorated tennis players to ever touch the court, but Roger Federer says he's finally ready to retire. We'll tell you why he's decided to call it quits and when his last match will take place. Next.
Archie Brass loves serving up food in St. Henry, and it's passion like his that has helped keep the Green Spot full of customers for 75 years.
We try to give a good product at a great price, so we pretty much stay busy all year round, and we do the best for our customers. Today we're celebrating 75 years, so we did a 75-cent hot dog, fries, and soft drink at 75 cents each.
It's no accident that the Green Spot is always busy. Customers love the food.
My good buddy recommended this place, and that's why I'm here.
Danny Bash says it's his first time in Montreal and his first time eating a poutine.
It was amazing. I like the taste, I like the flavor, I like the just the thickness of the sauce they make at this place, and like I say, all the recommendation happened and made me to come into this place.
It's a simple formula: steamed all-dressed dogs with some fries on the side, and you get a mouthful of success.
It's the best steam, the best frit, and the bacon and eggs, the breakfast, you know. It's too bad I'm not paying the same price as I did 20 years ago, but it's still worth it.
Greenblatt didn't qualify, but today the restaurant gave free food for anyone 75 and up.
Well, it's wonderful, you know. You have to have some perks when you get older.
Over its 75-year run, the Green Spot has been a landmark for customers of all ages, from generation to generation. Since I was young, I've been coming here after school. My kids come eat here after school too, she says. It's a great atmosphere. People are nice.
It's pretty busy, but regardless of the sale, it's always busy like this, you know.
Brass says there are more specials on the way as they continue to celebrate their 75th year, and that customers can expect the Green Spot to keep hitting the sweet spot for years to come. John Ngala, CBC News, Montreal.
They're the most studied and famous whale family in the world. What's pushing J-Pod to the brink? I'm Gloria Makarenko, host of the new CBC British Columbia original podcast, Killers. Is it too late to save them?
Well, tennis fans are still taking in the news tonight that one of the greats, Roger Federer, has called it quits. The Swiss athlete won 20 Grand Slams in a career spanning more than 2 decades. Chris Reyes looks at a generational change for pro tennis.
few would be surprised at how Swiss tennis superstar Roger Federer chose to say goodbye.
To my tennis family and beyond. The Labour Cup next week in London will be my final ATP event.
Reading a long and heartfelt letter. As famous for his elegance and grace as for those punishing shots with that signature one-handed backhand.
How old do you want to be?
He once told a bunch of kids he would retire an old man.
I hope I'm going to be like 90 years old.
But after 24 years and 1,500 matches, he now says his 41-year-old body, fresh off another knee surgery, was telling him it was time. His fans at Wimbledon, on whose center court he won a record 8 titles, quick to react.
Well, he was just so fluid and made it look easy.
He's the Jordan of tennis. Style, class, amazing tennis player.
And from his tennis community, an outpouring of love. Posts from all the top players and tournaments. From Spain's Rafael Nadal, "Dear Roger, I wish this day would have never come." The drama of their rivalry is legendary. In 2008, they played an almost 5-hour Wimbledon final that some call the greatest tennis match ever.
Obviously, it's a shock to the tennis world. I mean, I think he's the greatest player of all time.
This Canadian tennis writer says he'll miss how beautifully Federer played.
I would say about Federer is that he had more of a flowing game. He just flowed all over the court, seemed to float all over the court.
Here in New York, Federer won 5 U.S. Open titles in a row. That's unmatched. 20 Grand Slam titles in total, 2 big wins at the Canadian Open. And next week at his big send-off in London at the Laver Cup, he'll share the court with his best rivals, including Novak Djokovic and Nadal, along with the younger generation who no doubt hope to follow in his footsteps. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
It's a symbol of a bygone era when BC's produce was abundant and beautifully packaged. Fruit crates were once prevalent in the province, but while the apples they carried are only good for a little while, a Vernon man has kept their labels fresh, amassing quite the collection. Reporter Winston Cito and video producer Tom Popick paid him a visit.
The Lion brand, the Creston Valley, they're all pretty rare.
Larry Cards is a retired postman and has never been a farmer, but his living room looks like a lush Okanagan orchard. Over 4 decades, he has collected thousands of vintage fruit crate labels that BC growers use to market their fresh products.
I joined the Vernon Collectors Club in 1988, a year after it started, and a couple of the collectors brought fruit box labels for show and tell there, and I was attracted to the the great graphics and the great colors that really stood out. Say I always collected things, and I like the history that goes with along with the labels. I like learning about the different packing houses and when they started and how long they were in business.
The Okanagan has been Canada's fruit basket for more than a century. During its heyday in the 1930s, the fruit industry operated as many as 88 packing houses across the region. One of them is Laurel Packing House. It survived a big fire that burned down most of the industrial buildings in downtown Kelowna back in the 60s. Today is the home of the Okanagan Wine and Orchard Museum.
It's supposed to be big. It's supposed to be bold, it's supposed to be colorful and simple.
Wayne Wilson was the museum's curator of fruit crate labels in the 80s. He says these labels were meant to make Okanagan fruits more competitive than the American ones. While the labels look beautiful, the competition among designers could turn a little bit ugly.
The artwork is actually borrowed, shall we say, stolen from other labels in other parts of North America. So there is a label called Terrier brand, for example. That Terrier dog that's on the label was actually used for shipping lemons out of Los Angeles area. I was able to talk to one elderly graphic designer, and he was pretty clear that the border in terms of graphic design was a pretty porous border. So these designs went back and forth all the time.
But when wooden boxes stopped being used, so did the paper labels.
The wooden apple boxes became defunct. They were taken over by cardboard apple boxes in the 1950s and 1960s. And those cardboard boxes were printed, they were pre-printed already. So there was really no need for the labels.
For people living in Kelowna, the legacy of fruit crate labels lives on. About 10 years ago, Kelowna museums worked with the city to wrap hundreds of street utility boxes with replica labels like this to encourage graffiti. Wayne Wilson says the project may not entirely solve the issue of vandalism, but he hopes the street art project can raise public awareness of Okanagan's history.
I think a community that knows more about its history, I think is just a better community, because I think it's just too good an opportunity to pass up for us to learn something about the place that we live in and drive through every day. These are just little cues and clues to our own history.
For Larry Cotts, he says he won't grow his collection anymore, but he will keep his labels in good shape to preserve this interesting slice of Okanagan history. Winston Cito, CBC News, Kelowna.
You always learn something new. Thanks for that, Winston and Tom, for that very fascinating story. I imagine our Justin McElroy's house may end up looking like Larry's place, full of pins and pennants one day. Very cool. All right, that does it for us tonight for CBC News at 6. And to remind you, of course, you can always download CBC Gem. That is our free app. Your next television newscast is at 11 o'clock tonight with Michelle Gassoub right after The National. Have a good night.